Trespassing in a Child's Head Unwillingly by Kitty Cat on AO3. Chapter 31, The Final Truth. Izuku yawned and rubbed his eyes as he made his way back in through the window. He wasn't even given a warning when a plush went flying at his head. He raised his hands to block it, but it hit him square in the face before falling to the floor pathetically. "What was that for?" he asked, picking up the stuffed bear. Kachan glared at him from where he was sitting straight up in the bed. He had a book beside him as well as a flashlight. "Have you slept at all?" Izuku asked hesitantly. "Why the fuck are you being weird?" Kachan asked, picking up another stuffed animal. Wait, Izuku called, holding his hands up. "Don't just..." The stuffed sheep hit him in the chest. "Where were you?" Kachan asked, getting out of the bed to march over to Izuku. The stuffed animals were suddenly a much better idea. "Sneaking off in the middle of the night? What the fuck has happened to you?" Izuku choked, holding his still bandaged wrist out. Kachan stopped inches in front of it, glaring at him. "Okay, so just hold on. Let me explain. You have 5 seconds. Izuku stuttered and Kachan held up 4 fingers. "Wait, okay, I was going for a walk. That's it. I promise. I went to the beach." "For over an hour," Kachan huffed, balling his raised fist. "I've tried to give you fucking space, but now you're being ridiculous. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? You know exactly why, too." He grabbed the stuffed animal from Izuku's hands, squeezing it in his hands tightly. "Okay, Izuku stuttered, his sleep-deprived brain trying to process his extremely loud words. "Can we talk?" he tried, holding his hands up. Kachan huffed, shoving him, though not hard. "Can we talk? Of fucking course we can. That's what you have been doing all damn week." Izuku took the stuffed animal from him, grunting with the effort. "No yelling. Please? I didn't sleep yet." Kachan sighed, walking over to the side table. He grabbed a monster can, turning on his heel. "Don't throw it," Izuku yelled, ducking down. "I wasn't going to, dumbass," he said, with a slight chuckle. He sat on his bed, nodding Izuku over. He hesitantly followed, tossing the stuffed animal back onto the bed before he sat down. "Now talk," he ordered, as he popped the can open and passed it open. Izuku nodded before he sighed. He pressed the can in a few times before it popped back out in his hands. "Cats, Nope, we're not using that stupid-ass nickname for this." "Kachan," Izuku corrected, and Kachan nodded. "Is there something you aren't telling me about All Might?" Kachan shook his head, frowning. "Me not telling you something?" Says the dumbass who missed more school than needed and is sneaking out at night. Izuku chuckled before he took a swig of the drink. It stung the roof of his parched mouth before he took another, and he sighed. "I saw you, Kachan. I saw you there, in the plane. You shouldn't be there." Kachan went still before he groaned and flopped back onto the bed. "I was going to tell you, Izuku. I promise. He covered his face with a pillow as Izuku flopped beside him. "Why didn't you?" he whispered, looking up at the stars on the roof from when they were young. Kachan bit his lip. "I don't know. I really don't. I wanted to ask you, but it was so sudden and I didn't fucking know how." Izuku nodded. The room fell into a silence, not stifling like it had been for the past week, but somewhat comforting, like that man at the beach. "Did you know I'm not the only one to not really like All Might?" He turned, lying on his side to face Kachan. He didn't follow suit, but he did sigh. "Yeah, me." Izuku chuckled, shaking his head. No. Do you remember the mall trip I took with you and your classmates before everything?" Kachan nodded, shutting his eyes. "What about it?" "There was a dude there. He looked just a bit older than us. But anyways, me and him were talking. He said he hated All Might, that All Might hadn't saved him or something, though he said that tonight, Anyways, Kachan sat up quickly, looking over at Izuku. "Hold the fuck up. What do you mean tonight? Is that where you were?" His voice rose in pitch at the end as he bit his cheek. Izuku groaned, sitting up slowly. "Well, yeah, he was on the beach and... So this random man you just saw in the mall who just happened to disappear when we showed up, just happened to also be on the beach you went to at midnight. He emphasized both times he said happened, sitting up straighter. Izuku hesitated before he nodded. Well, yeah, but fucking what, nerd? Kachan yelled, laughing slightly. How idiotic do you have to be? He's clearly stalking you. Don't what? Just, huh? Izuku raised his hands before he lowered them with a frown. He went to speak, then stopped. Okay, he nodded, biting his lip. Well, you may be onto something. I mean, it could just be coincidence, but no, Kachan said, flicking Izuku's forehead. You have a fucking stalker. What did the others say about it? Izuku stared at him for a second before he shook his head. I haven't slept yet. How would I know? Kachan went to speak, but Izuku stopped him. That aside for another time when I can process it. Why didn't you tell me? How did it happen? Is this it? What happened with the quirk? They were already so freaked out about 2 users for this long. What does adding you do? And does he know I have it? Can you tell? Did you tell him? Kachan slapped a hand over Izuku's mouth. Shut the fuck... Did you just lick my hand? He yelled, pulling it away and wiping it on Izuku's shirt. You put it by my mouth, Izuku argued with a small grin. Kachan sighed, crawling back on the bed to lean against the wall. Izuku followed. I promise, I didn't mean to keep it a secret. I was trying to figure it all out. He gave it to me after the sports festival. Izuku stared at him, and he shrugged slightly before he took the monster from Izuku and took a drink. So, all this time, you've had it? Kachan shook his head. No, not really. I mean, there were times my quirk acted weird. All those bruises and stuff. Recovery girl had to patch the worst ones. I still can't control when it happens. He looked down at his hands before he groaned and threw his head back against the wall. I regret taking the stupid fucking quirk. I was stupid and wasn't thinking. I can't even use my quirk. The one thing I could do well. Izuku hummed, leaning onto his shoulder. Kachan rested on his head. That's not all you're good at, and you know it. I'm not mad, I promise. I'm hurt. Kachan sighed. I should have fucking said something, but you were dealing with so much already, and no, All Might doesn't know you have it. You've seen the way he vacates a room if you step foot in it. He's fucking terrified of you. Izuku snorted, shutting his eyes. The energy drink was taking too long to kick in. It was quiet for a moment, Kachan's hand running along the stuffed animal, the only movement. Right before Izuku drifted off, Kachan bounced his shoulder. When are you going to talk to him? He whispered. Izuku bit his cheek, blinking before he shut his eyes again. That wasn't a question he could answer. Not now. Maybe not ever. Izuku jumped as Nana grabbed his shoulders, squeezing them tightly. Her eyes were wide and frantic, her voice shaky. Izuku, tell me the name again. What was his name? Izuku blinked at her, his brain trying to process the sudden onslaught. Who? Kachan? Nana sighed, letting go of him as she paced around the room. En pulled her close, rubbing her shoulders, though he was smaller than her. I'm sure it's not him. It's fine. Just breathe. He tightened his hold, and Izuku had to fight to not make a comment. He had never seen En that gentle. Someone want to tell me what's going on? Izuku asked, walking over to the table. Yoichi's finger tapped against the table, a tick Izuku had never seen him do before. He was biting his lip, and Izuku could swear it was bleeding before it went back to normal. Everyone was off. Bruce appeared beside Izuku and took him by the shoulders, far gentler than Nana had been, as he guided him to the rug that wasn't used for most visits to the plane now. That man. We think Katsuki is right, he said, letting Izuku sit in the chair as the rest moved around him. A new chair appeared for Yoichi as well, but he didn't take it, his hands clasped in kudos. The man? Izuku asked, squinting. You mean the one with the allergies? At the beach and mall? Daigoro nodded. The one Katsuki said is stalking you. We think he's right. Izuku bit his lip before he glanced back over to Nana, still cradled in En's arms. Okay, I'll watch out for him. This is a bit of an overreaction, though. Izuku whispered, biting his lip. Izuku, Bruce said with an exasperated sigh. Have you been paying attention to the news at all? Or Eraserhead when he was yelling at you for breaking Katsuki out? He moved to stand on the other side of Yoichi, who leaned into him. Izuku hesitantly shook his head. He tried to stay off the news when he could. It was just All Might, over and over. With the League, it was even more prevalent. He could get by just fine without seeing them constantly, and he knew Kacchan felt the same. Kudo sighed, squeezing Yoichi's hand. That man, the one at the mall and beach, he's their leader. At least, the one at the front. Of course, the real one's behind bars, and he isn't getting out anytime soon. Toshinori isn't that stupid. Yoichi didn't even flinch at the real name, his eyes looking over the group repeatedly, as if he was seeing something that wasn't there. The white-haired one. I don't know why he chose you, or why he didn't hurt you. We would have stepped forward if needed. Izuku held a hand up before lowering it, trying to think. He hadn't recognized the man. Sure, it was dark at the beach, and he hadn't really seen him before them all. He didn't seem like a villain, though. Not one that tried to hurt Kacchan and his friends multiple times. He had just seemed confused. He bit his cheek before he gasped and looked up. The man's name. He hadn't paid it much attention. Shigaraki. That's your name, Izuku said, narrowing his eyes. Oh my god, is he your relative or something? Is this just another secret? I mean, the hair and the... He's not mine, Yoichi said, before he paused. I'm sorry, Izuku, but we couldn't even be sure that he was still alive. We hoped 8 had finally ended it once and for all. He coughed, doubling over as the other two caught him. Izuku stood, moving over to him as he finally sat, collapsing back into the chair. Izuku stopped in front of him, trying to figure out how to word it. I thought we were done with secrets, he finally whispered. Yoichi sighed, nodding. I'm sorry, Izuku. We didn't have any other way. Izuku sat in front of him, leaning back onto his good wrist. So tell me now. I've been through enough. I can handle the truth for once. I'm tired of all the lies. And telling me it's for my safety. I know what to do. I have you guys here. It's safer to know the truth. Yoichi sighed. You're right. Of course you are. He chuckled slightly before coughing again. But I need to be honest. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to bring it up again. It's something I would rather not think about. Kudo sighed. Would you rather one of us tell the whole story? Yoichi shook his head. No, he needs to hear it from me. He looked up, frowning. That man, and the one you must have seen, he is my elder brother. Izuku groaned, flopping back onto his back as Yoichi finally went quiet. He didn't want to, but there was a part of him that understood Yoichi's hesitation to tell him. His brother had killed every one of them, whether directly or indirectly. He was the one who had given Yoichi the ability to even pass his quirk down. He was the cause of it all. Why hadn't he just told Izuku, though? He could have understood. He rubbed his face before he sat back up. Okay, are there any other things I should know? He asked, looking around the group. They all shook their heads, except for Nana and En, who hadn't moved the whole time. Izuku glared at them as En finally let Nana go. She still leaned against him, rubbing at her eyes. There's something else, En said with a sigh. Yoichi even seemed surprised a bit, turning with the rest to look at Nana and En. What is it? He asked, gripping Kudo and Bruce's hands tighter. Nana stepped forward, her movements shaky. I know I've mentioned him, but my son, do you know what I've told you? She whispered, messing with her nails. Daigoro hesitated before being the one to speak up. Not really. You've always been cagey about him. We never pushed because we knew it was a sore subject. He shrugged before going to stand up. No, she said quickly. No, just stay. I need to talk about this. It's relevant, She took a deep breath before she stood up straight. I left him when I learned about how dangerous the Quirk was. He was supposed to be safer without me, but then she chuckled lightly. I always wanted to go back, but I was killed shortly after with no way to tell him I was sorry. I thought that was it. It should have been it. Nana, Hikage said, though it wasn't with exasperation, but care. It's okay. She nodded, shutting her eyes before she opened them again, looking right at Izuku. That boy, the one that's being called Shigaraki, he's mine. He's my grandson. Izuku didn't even have the energy to be shocked at the revelation. The only thing he was grateful for was that it wasn't another lie, not from any of them. Are you sure? Bruce asked, his voice dipping. Because you need to be positive. She nodded, smiling sadly. I know him. He has my boy's eyes. He is a Shimura. She choked on a sob, rubbing at her eyes as she pushed away from En, who tried to step forward. We need to go to the detective. He can help more than anyone. I need to know the truth. Izuku looked over to Yoichi, who was staring right back. His lips were drawn tight as he sighed. You know everything now, Izuku. It's up to you. My, mom said you wanted to meet me here? Izuku asked, sitting next to Miss Midnight, who was seated on a park bench. Eri wasn't too far away, playing in the sand by herself. You're watching her again? Miss Midnight nodded, biting her lip. There's been a development in her case. I thought you would want to know. She leaned forward on her knees, going silent. Izuku wasn't sure what she wanted him to say, so he didn't say anything. Eri put her stuffed bear in the sand and stared at it for a second before she pulled it back out and wiped it off. I don't know how to help her, Miss Midnight whispered. She won't play with other kids, and her independent play is so sad to see. She doesn't laugh or tell stories. It's all so robotic. Her fist tightened. When I think of what that bastard did to her. She sucked in a breath before she sighed and turned to face Izuku. Is there anything I can do to help? He asked hesitantly. She chuckled slightly before she bit her lip. Come with us. To see him. Izuku paused before he glanced back at Eri, still struggling with play. You caught him. The man from the alley. That's it. It's over. Miss Midnight smiled and nodded. It's over. They have him in custody, and he won't be able to hurt anyone, ever again. But his quirk. I had a few theories, and she put a hand on his before she shook her head. It's over. This is what she needs to move on, and she needs to do with you and Bakugou. Izuku laughed as he nodded. Yes, of course. Kachan's in training, but yes. Eri's hand tightened in Izuku's as they walked together, Kachan holding her other hand. She hadn't let go of either of them since she was told where they were going. As they neared, her breathing got faster and her palms more sweaty. For such a little girl, she looked like she was about to fall over. Are you sure this is the right thing? Kachan whispered, looking over to the 3 heroes who came with them. They had all taken turns watching Eri, so it made sense. It did little to ease Izuku's nerves. He had only met the man once, and he hoped that he would never have to see him again. It is, Eraser had said, ruffling Eri's horn, even though he got no response. There'll be more heroes inside, and officers everywhere. We don't have to worry about safety, but there were a lot more people who worked on this case. Izuku nodded as he wiped his other hand on his pant leg. They still hadn't been told much, not until after the trial, but Izuku was glad for Eraserhead. If something happened with Eri's or that man's quirk, he shivered and Eri gripped tighter. Are you scared? She whispered in the same hushed tones they all had been using. Izuku laughed slightly, pausing in front of the station doors to bend down. A little, he confessed, and her face twisted. But I'm more happy he's caught. He won't ever be able to hurt you again, Eri. You understand that? She hesitated before she nodded. Izuku reached to pick her up, but she shook her head. Instead, she turned to Kachan, holding her hands up in a silent question. Fine, brat, Kachan said, poking her nose as he grinned. He bounced her onto his hip, handing her the bear she had been carrying. She hugged it close, smiling. Yoichi will keep me safe, she promised herself. Kachan looked up at Izuku with wide eyes, but he shrugged, leading them inside without a word. Eraserhead had been right. The entire station was packed, some heroes and many officers. They all kept talking as the group passed, but Izuku could tell they were glancing over, their attention diverted, all with smiles on their face. Miss Midnight patted him on the shoulder, turning him down a separate hallway. He followed her lead, pushing open a door for the others. It was a lot less crowded inside, only Detective Tsukuyuchi and Sir Night-Eye in there. The hero's eyes passed right over him, no recognition flashing. Hi, Eri, he said as he nodded his head. Eri waved back before she tucked back into Kachan's shoulder. Is he here? She whispered, her hands shaking. Detective Naosama hesitated. Is there any way you can tell us that, sweetie? Just tell us if you recognize him, okay? Eri nodded, biting her lip as she stared at the cloth-covered window. Detective Naosama raised the curtain cord, showing the man inside. Izuku knew that face. It might have been dark, but he recognized the pure hatred in the eyes. Eri smacked Kachan's chest, her little fist balled up. Do you want to go down? He asked, and she smacked his chest again. He set her down, and she walked up to the window, the bear tucked tight in her arms. She stared at the man for a second before she nodded. That's Papa. That's Papa, she repeated, her voice clear. Detective Tsukuyuchi sighed, nodding. Eri, do you remember anyone ever calling him anything else? Any name? She paused before she looked up at him. Overhaul, she whispered, holding the bear tighter. Kachan clicked his tongue as he glanced over to Izuku, who shrugged, confused. God, you really don't watch the news enough, nerd, he whispered. Izuku punched him in the shoulder and turned to Eri. She had moved through as the adults began to talk. Eri, no, he yelled, and he grabbed her hand, pulling it away from the doorknob. You can't do that, Eri, he chided her gently, kneeling down. Her face was still, her eyes searching him for something. I want to see him, she said, as she yanked her hand back. Izuku went to stop her, but Miss Midnight touched his shoulder. Let her, she whispered, as the door cracked open. Izuku stood. But his quirk, what if... Miss Midnight sighed as she guided Izuku into the room behind Eri. Chisaki, she said, leaning forward onto the table. His eyes jumped up to hers, hate in his sneer. I'm going to get out, and when I do... He paused, his gaze changing. You, he whispered, and Izuku's heart churned. That wasn't hate anymore. That was admiration, and it was directed at Eri. The perfect. He screamed in pain as Eri managed to land a solid punch to his crotch, her fist in the exact position Izuku had taught her. You meanie, she yelled as she raised her fist again. Miss Midnight pulled her away right as the man went to lunge. He didn't get very far, the restraints keeping him on the chair, but the sudden movement made the coat that had been around him fall, revealing the fact he wasn't chained up by both wrists. He was missing his entire left arm, and his right was completely limp, cuts and stitches running along it. They were sick, Eri. We were going to help them, he yelled through clenched teeth. Eri turned, wrapping herself into Miss Midnight. You did this. You're hurting them all. Izuku didn't even think before he landed a kick to the man's crotch, grateful his chair was bolted to the floor so he got the full impact. Eraserhead's scarf wrapped around him and pulled him from the room as the man groaned in pain. The door shut behind them all, Eri safely tucked into Miss Midnight. Do you want to get into serious trouble, Midoriya? Eraserhead asked, unwrapping his scarf. After everything you've been through. Don't yell at him. He was in the fucking right, Kachan countered. That man deserves 100 kicks to the balls for what he did. He stepped up beside Izuku, nudging him with his elbow as he grinned. Eraserhead groaned, rubbing his eyes. In front of a detective and 4 pro heroes, you just assaulted a man in custody. Detective Tsukuyuchi cut in. What assault? I didn't see anything like that. Izuku froze, looking up at him, but his gaze was leveled at Eraserhead. I'm glad we caught the bastard and can put all this behind us, he said with a small nod. I just wish it could have been us, and not that group of Sir Night-Eye started to say before Present Mike snapped his fingers and pointed to Izuku and Kacchan. We're going to head out. Get Eri down for a nap, he said, shaking his head. The smile had not left his face the entire time. Miss Midnight chuckled as she nodded. Your mother said you two had plans near here. Izuku nodded, and she sighed. Then I'll leave you here. And Izuku. She smiled softly. I'll see you in class Monday? Izuku grinned. Yeah, I'll be there, he promised. She left with the others, shutting the door behind them. Detective Tsukuyuchi dropped the curtain before he looked back at them. What do you two want? Izuku sighed, doing his best to muster up a decent smile. I need you to pull up some records for me. And I need to tell you the truth, so you'll help me. Detective Tsukuyuchi shook his head before he chuckled softly. Like father, like son, he muttered before he nodded. Come on, let's talk in my office. Oof, okay, again, this one's recorded before my class on the 1st. I should probably be heading out, but we're gonna ignore that fact. Kacchan took All Might's Quirk. So I do kind of explain how this works and how it affects them, because now not only is the quirk kind of passed off between 3, 2 of those are sharing the actual strong quirks, the strong power that has been said multiple times it can kill someone if they're not like well adjusted to it. And then you have Izuku, who has the Vestiges, who also has like a ghost, maybe, of their quirks is the best way to explain it. Like a really faint version of their quirks. So it's spread out between 3 people right now, and it's really thin. I remember, maybe it was in a movie, or maybe it was the last season of My Hero, which I haven't seen, and I don't read the manga, that Katsuki did get one for all for a little bit. I honestly... Everything I know about that season's all 3 spoilers, but like I know the main gist of the entire season. So I don't know how accurate this is to kind of what happens when Katsuki gets it in the actual show, but I mean, this is my own interpretation of it. I kind of end all fics after the Camino, because after that I kind of just, kind of trail off. This one doesn't end right after Camino, but let's see. So he took it, and it's clearly hurting him. It's not working with his quirk. It's not working how it should. So I kind of get into that whole thing at the end. Nana knows Shigaraki. And, oh my god, I feel so bad for her. I love my mom characters and writing them. It feels so bad. But yeah, she knows him. Eri, oh my gosh, the little girl. So I like to imagine that in this one there was no raid on Overhaul's place like there was in the actual anime, because I think after Izuku's whole little like spiel to Shigaraki, he just did not have the patience for Overhaul. So after Overhaul killed Big Sis Magne, I'm kind of under the thought that Toga got one of his arms and kind of fully ruined it, just cut up all that muscle so he can't use that arm at all. And then Compress got the other one because screw Overhaul and I want to get rid of him. Okay. This one was written back in December, because it was right before my finals, and then I didn't write the entire break, and I didn't update again until 2 months later, so not that long ago I updated it. Anyways, I'm working on the last 2 chapters right now, and I hope to get them finished before I can record them. They'll probably be posted the same day they'll probably get posted on AO3 the same day they get posted on YouTube. That way it's just kind of consistent and I can read through them and see if there's any mistakes I need to fix before I post them. Anyways, the next one is called Chapter 32, Escapades of the Numbers, and I hope to see you there on the 3rd, so tomorrow.